Record last time, right?
I did record, but I didn't send it.
Oh, okay, because I missed it.
I wanted to see who really misses it, so.
I missed it.
Okay. All right. Chapter 40 is a big chapter, a very deep chapter. And the topic of chapter 40 is the idea of Kavanagh. To do when we do mitzvahs and when we daven, to have proper Kavanagh. What is Kavanagh? Kavanagh means intention, concentration, meditation. And he goes into a whole lengthy debate. Is Kavanagh important, and why is it important? So from the get-go, we said that a mitzvah, just the very fact of doing the mitzvah, is we affect the mitzvah. The mitzvah has its counts. In other words, if you don't have the proper kavanah or kavanah, it's better to do the mitzvah than not doing the mitzvah. However, kavanah is an important ingredient to elevate the mitzvah, to connect the mitzvah to Hashem. Because basically, we are physical beings. A mitzvah is a physical activity. When I do a mitzvah, even when I pray, even when I think Torah, it's still it's the thinking. My thinking ability comes from the animal soul that animates my brain. So when I think Torah, when I speak Torah, when I daven, the force that gives the power, the energy that gives me the ability to daven comes from the animal soul. But so it's in other words, it might be you might do the mitzvah, but it might be still stuck in the physical realm. Our job is to take the mitzvah and give its wings to allow the mitzvah to fly, allow the mitzvah to take off and to connect to Hashem. And from Hashem's perspective, there are many levels. How Hashem has descended, so to speak, his energy and his light to this world. We talked about Tzimtzum. We talked about, in order for Hashem to create and to animate the world, there has to be a what's called a Tzimtzum, which means Hashem had to contract or put a veil over his infinite light to give the ability to a world that thinks and feels as an independent existence outside of Hashem to exist. And the problem is that when I do a mitzvah and the mitzvah is cold or there's no soul in the mitzvah gets stuck in the other side of the tzimtzum. I want to get through back, kind of will take it backstage. I want to go through the tzimtzum so I can come, my mitzvah can come and attach myself to the Or and Sof. And the more intention I have, the more kavanah, the more intensity I have, the higher the mitzvah will elevate itself. We talked about the different worlds, the world of Bria, Yetzira, Asir, which basically there's the world of intellect, the world of emotion, how Hashem expresses himself through the godly emotion like chesed and gvura, kindness. Then there's God's wisdom. And then there's the infinite God, which is beyond, which we call Kesser, which is beyond all the levels of emotion and intellect. So if I do a mitzvah with my emotion, my mitzvah elevates to Hashem's emotion level. If I do a mitzvah and with a lot of intellect, with a lot of kavanah, with a lot of meditation, then I can even reach the higher level. And if I do the mitzvah with all of that, with fear and love for Hashem, but complete nullification, no self, no ego, that's how the mitzvah can reach to the infinite light. So this was in a nutshell what we learned till here. And what's important when it comes to mitzvah is to always remember that we want to do the mitzvah not from my perspective, but from God's perspective. What does God want? What does God want me to do? Do I want to do it because I'm in the mood and I love Hashem, or when I want to do it because Hashem wants me to do it, and Hashem gets nachas from when I do something, even if I'm not in the mood. With this, let's go back inside. Just the last thing we said also in the end of last week, that there are three categories of intent, of kavanah. There is a positive intent, that we do the mitzvah for Hashem. There is a neutral intent, where you just do the mitzvah because you have to do it, but you don't put your mind and emotion involved. And then there's a selfish intent. You do the mitzvah because it gives you honor, or gives you makes you feel good, or that's for selfish purposes. So when it's for selfish purposes, for selfish intent, the mitzvah gets stuck in klippa, we said. Because again, the energy of doing the mitzvah in itself comes from klippa. Because klippa means the shell, which is the animal soul. When my ego is engaged in a mitzvah, then what propels the mitzvah, what gives it its energy, ego is from klippa. Not only from the animal soul, but even worse, from klippa. If it's a neutral intent, meaning that I don't have much devotion, but I do the mitzvah because Hashem asked me to do so. So it's not my ego, I'm just doing it almost like a robot. We said in the beginning of the chapter, it gets elevated to the world of angels, where angels are kind of like robots. They don't have the ability to really elevate themselves. So the mitzvah is spiritual in nature because you did the mitzvah Hashem, but it's kind of stuck. It doesn't really travel high. And the real idea is to have proper positive intent. What type of positive intent to have, how to have positive intent, is going to be the focus now in the end of this chapter, and mainly in the next chapter, chapter 41, which is one of the most popular chapters of Tanya. Every yeshiva boy, when they go to yeshiva, they are trained to study chapter 41 by heart and to meditate on chapter 41 before they pray. So I can't wait to get to 41. It gets a lot lighter. 40 was very deep. That's why they don't teach it to the yeshiva boys so much. All from yeshiva, I remember 41. 40, I don't remember much. So now that we broke ahead the last few weeks, let's conclude 40. And next time around, we'll have a big party for 41. We are holding page 481 on top, section 3, concluding thoughts on Kavanagh. We're using the practical Tanya. If you don't have it, just listen in. So based on all this discussion in chapter 35 to 37 about the importance of the mitzvah act, and discussion from chapter 38 up to this point about the value of a kavanah, we can now explain well the metaphorical depiction of reverence and love as wings of a bird. As the verse states, they were flying with two. Isaiah writes that they were flying with two, that just like a bird needs two wings to fly, so too a mitzvah needs both love and reverence to propel it heavenward, as we will see below more clearly from the Tikkun Zohar. In discussion in chapter 35 to 40, we now have an understanding of the relation between a mitzvah act and its kavanah, which could be summed up in a number of points. Number one, both the mitzvah act and its kavanah are the divine will. Number two, nevertheless, without the act being performed precisely, the entire mitzvah is disqualified and kavanah will not help. And three, a mitzvah act without kavanah is valid, but only has a minuscule amount of divine light and energy, like a body without a soul. So it cannot rise to Hashem. And number four, only a mitzvah with kavanah can escape the trappings of this world and rise to a place where it can be united with God. So again, these are four important points that we basically covered in the last 5-6 chapters. Number one, that both the mitzvah act and the kavanah are part of the mitzvah, part of Hashem's will. What does that mean? That means that only the mitzvah and only the kavanah is the will of Hashem. And if I do the will of Hashem, I have the ability to connect to the essence of Hashem, because we've learned that the will, when we say willpower, lies at the very core of our essence. right? We said that the emotions is an expression of who I am. Even intellect is an expression of who I am. I express myself through my wisdom and to others. But will is inside. It goes even beyond my intellect. So when we say that a mitzvah is the will of Hashem, that means that I connect to Hashem. When I perform that will, when I perform that commandment, I connect to the will, which by extension means I connect to the essence of Hashem. But not only the mitzvah, but also the kavanah, the intention. So for example, it's so important. When I do a mitzvah, and I do the mitzvah, I light the Shabbos candles, right? And I just do it because you got to do it, right? So that I fulfilled the mitzvah, but I didn't fulfill the kavanah. There was no kavanah. There's no intention. What intention? Intention to do it because Shabbos is a day of rest. Shabbos is a day of peace. That I recognize that Hashem has created the world in 6 days. That on 7th day, Hashem connects with me. I have the ability to connect and to elevate. And lighting the candle brings in that light. And by me lighting the candle, I express my love and fear for Hashem. That in itself is also, that information I just shared, is also part of the mitzvah. It's the will of it's a kavanah of the mitzvah. So that in itself also, by me having that, now my intellect, my meditation, my emotion, and my will connects with the will and emotion and the intellect of Hashem as well. That's number one. Number two, he said that if you don't do the mitzvah, if you just have the meditation, for example, right? Okay, Friday comes and I'm not gonna light candles. I don't believe in candles, right? I'm just gonna go out onto the ocean and I'm gonna close my eyes and I'm gonna meditate about Hashem's greatness, that the Shabbos is here, and by this I'm fulfilling the mitzvah of Shabbos. It's lacking the whole body of the mitzvah. So it's just the soul it's not even the soul because it's not the mitzvah. So don't underestimate or don't deviate from the detail of the physical mitzvah. Number three, he said, a mitzvah act without kavanah is, oh, I'm sorry. No, that was number two was, okay, so the entire mitzvah is disqualified, correct? Number three, the mitzvah act without kavanah is valid. So if I do on the other flip side, if I just lighted the candles and I have no kavanah, it's still valid, but I'm only activating a little bit of light, not giving me much divine light or energy. It's like a body without a soul. And number four, a mitzvah with kavanah can escape the trappings of the world. I always love that. The trappings of the world. The trappings of the world means we live in a world of confusion. We live in a world of tzimtzum, of limitation. When I say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, what I'm trying to say, it goes back to every mitzvah, because Shema is really the expression of every mitzvah. What is Shema? Listen, Yisrael, right? Yisrael, which is by in itself a very powerful name. Yeah, just a side point. Yisrael has the word El on the end, which is the name of Hashem, which is the name of mercy, the first of the 13 attributes of mercy. Keil Racham V'Chanon. El. The Yud refers to Hashem, to the essence of Hashem, and the Reish and Shin Reish in Hebrew means Sar. Sar means to be a master. Or so a Jew has the ability to be a master over the ability to connect himself to the essence of Hashem. Then we say Hashem Elokeinu. We know that the word Hashem, Yud Vav Kei, refers to the God of miracles, the God that transcends nature. Elokeinu comes from the word of Elokim, that refers to God, how he is within nature. And we are saying that the God of nature and God of miracles, God is really the same God, same Hashem. Hashem Echad is one Hashem. But how do I bring heaven and earth together? How do I bring the transcendent God and the God who has kind of put himself in through the Tzimtzum idea to come into Elokeinu, into our world, the power for me to connect that is a mitzvah. The mitzvah is what breaks the boundaries of the Tzimtzum, and it can elevate the mitzvah that I'm doing and elevate myself to Yud-Kei-Vav-Kei, to the essence of Hashem. But for that to get upgraded, I need to have Kavanagh. And continue over here. Let's continue. The complex relationship is compared here to a bird. The mitzvah act and its two wings, the Kavanagh resulting from love and reverence of God. The important point here is that the wings, while not crucial for its existence, are part of the bird. So this brings to light that Kavanagh is not an added feature which propels a mitzvah act to a desired destination. It's part of the mitzvah itself. So the bird is always the analogy to the mitzvah. So a bird without wings, still a bird, right? A mitzvah without kavanah is still a mitzvah. But without the wings, it cannot fly. There's the Rabbi Chaim Vital of blessed memory, wrote in Shah HaYichudim, one of the great Kabbalists, that a bird's wing are equivalent to a man's arms. Through with the sweetness of the judgment. Oh, sorry, continue page 484. This is a whole side note, which we're going to skip for now, but let's go to 484. For the right and left arms corresponding to love and reverence, Chesed is the right arm, and Gevurah is the left arm. So like we have two arms, it's like the wings. Chesed is the right arm. Chesed is what? Kindness. And left arm is Gevurah, which is strictness, which we're soon going to see. Those are the two wings. What are the two wings of Kavanagh? The right wing, the right arm, Chesed, represents the love for Hashem, and which is love Hashem is giving, is Chesed, it's flowing. It gives. Left arm refers to the fear and awe of Hashem, which is restricting, right? So those two, which we're going to elaborate exactly what does fear and awe and love Hashem mean, which we're going to elaborate in the next chapter, but these are the two wings. So the Tanya now cites another source for the idea that love and reverence are like the wings of a bird that makes it fly. And the Tikkun Zohar comments on the verse, if you counter the bird's nest containing chicks or eggs, and the mother sitting upon the chicks or upon the eggs, do not take the mother from upon the children. Noting the dual expression that the young birds are initially referred to as chicks and later as children, the Tikkun Zohar comments that if the Torah mitzvahs are carried out with reverence and love, they are called mature children. But if not, they are called chicks that are unable to fly. There's a mitzvah in Torah, one of the most strangest mitzvah of Torah, called Shiluach HaKam. And I say strange, I mean it's a mitzvah that has no rationale to it. That if you find a nest, you can look it up in Devarim chapter 22, verse 6. 1 second. Now if you find, 1 second. That if you find a nest and there is a mother sitting on her chicks, on her eggs, sorry, or the ready or if you of the ready sprout, the ready came out, the chicks came out, you can take the eggs or take the chicks, but you have to first send the mother away. You can't do it in front of the mother. It's cruel to do it in front of the mother. So it's actually a mitzvah to take the chicks for yourself. But that's not the discussion now. But the expression there is that first it calls the chicks and then it calls the children. So the idea is if it's done without love, then it's called chicks. I mean, it can't fly. The difference between chicks and children, basically by birds, chicks cannot fly and children can fly. Continue on. So the Tanya now clarifies the precise meaning of the bird wings analogy on page 485. For just as a bird's wings are not a crucial life-sustaining part of the body, as the Mishnah indicates that if a bird's wings are removed, it is not considered to have suffered a life-threatening injury and is kosher. So the main part of the bird being his head and the rest of its body apart from the wings. So the wings merely serving the head and body to let them fly. Likewise, metaphorically speaking, we see a similar relation between the act of the mitzvah, the body, and the kavanah, the wings. The act of speaking Torah and performing mitzvahs constitutes the head and the body. Now, don't get so distracted on the whole bird situation here, right? The Tanya and the Torah, whenever we want to bring an example, we also want to bring examples from Torah itself. Because Torah is not just a body of laws, but Torah also it expresses the reality. So when we're talking, Sandy, one second. So when we talk about a bird, for example, that the bird is still a bird without the wings, he also wants to express it that even in the kosher, in the laws of kosher, that when we slaughter an animal or a bird, after it's not just the slaughtering that has to be done precisely in the most accurate way the Torah prescribes, which is an instant incision, and that not only that has to be done properly, called shechita, but we also have to ensure that the bird and the animal is completely healthy. What type of a shochet after you slaughter the animal goes and inspects the body of the animal. If it finds a defect in the body, a defect that is life-threatening, right? Even though the animal's dead already. For example, there's a hole in the lungs. It's a popular one, right? The hole in the lungs. That means the animal could have died a few months later from that injury. Not the entire body, the entire animal is not kosher. Even though you slaughtered it with a blessing, you did all good. When it comes to a bird, if there's a bird that has wings, doesn't have wings, so it cannot fly, it's still a kosher bird. So the expression is that you see that the bird is still kosher. Yeah, what's the question, Sandy?
In kosher eggs,
Yeah.
when people who are kosher collect the eggs from the hens, they pick up the hen and they take the eggs that are underneath it in their nest. The eggs are not going to turn into chicks. They're just plain eggs that you would use to make scrambled eggs, let's say. To be kosher, do you have to remove that hen first so that it doesn't see its eggs being removed?
And no, I don't think that chicken is in this category.
A chicken is not in the category of the other birds.
Yes, I'm not an expert. Maybe Roy knows something about.
Well, it's a domesticated animal. It doesn't have to be a wild bird for shluchakin.
It has to be a wild. Exactly, it has to be a wild bird and it has to be in its nest.
So like a wild turkey. And if you remove the eggs from the wild turkey, those are going to turn into little baby turkeys. So in other words, this is for a domestic animal. It doesn't apply. Is that correct?
Correct. It has to be wild, and it cannot be yours. It has to be only on public grounds. We had this mitzvah on our property last year. We saw a bird putting a nest right outside our driveway, and so I got all the kids together. But it's on my property. So what I do? So what I did. Some people say I relinquished my ownership on the property for a few minutes. I said this property is public now. It's after. So we waited for the bird to come back. The bird came. We chased it away, and then we picked up the eggs, and we put the eggs back after. As long as you pick it up, we did the mitzvah. Okay, let's continue. So here we are on 486. The act of speaking Torah and performing mitzvahs constitutes the head and body of the Yichud HaElyon, merging of divine attributes, as we discussed at length in the note on page 480, 484. We did not do this long notes for another time. It's a very deep note, and a lot of Yichud HaElyon is really is basically what I told you, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, to unify the merging of divine attributes. When I recognize that all the attributes of Hashem, if it's the attribute of Chesed, the attributes of Elokim or Yokevavke, I come to a realization that's all one. That creates a very powerful effect, because that's what it's all about. We're on this world to create a oneness, to create that oneness in our consciousness, because we live in a world of division, the world of separateness. When I do a mitzvah, when I pray, what I'm really doing is I'm basically merging all the pieces together. That in general is also in our psyche. Our neshama is so powerful, and it comes into a body that is so what's the right word? So all over the place, right? And the more I think it was a young man that came to the Rebbe and was complaining to the Rebbe about why is everything so complicated? Why does life so complicated? Why does it he's the more deeper he tries to understand life, or the more deeper a person. I mean, you see that people of depth, right? People who are deep people also have a much harder time to live quietly. They're conflicted. They're conflicted between many different places. Rebbe basically said, I wish I had the wording, because the wording is so gold. And then I'll post it. That because you have such a powerful neshama, you have such powers, and your neshama comes into a body that is so restrictive. The neshama feels like it's all these restriction, all these body elements are all over the place. Your job is to merge them all together, and if you merge them all together, that's what the neshama feels at ease. And that's where mitzvahs and Torah and all that comes into place, because that gives us the consciousness how everything is really one. All right, let's continue. And as discussed in the note, the power to bring about Yichud Elyon comes from divine will, which is disclosed through the acts of Torah mitzvahs, regardless of Kavanagh. And the reverence and love are like the wings of the Torah mitzvahs, which lift them to a higher place, which is free from the limitations of this world, a world in which divine light cannot shine due to the many diminishments in Tzumim. And in the higher place, on page 487, in the higher place, it is possible for the will of the blessed infinite light and the Yichud Elyon to be manifest. That higher place being the sephiros of either the world of Yetzirah or Beriah. So the higher you elevate yourself, the easier it will merge, because there the separation becomes so much less visible. The Tanya, page 488, the Tanya now questions the appropriateness of the bird's analogy. So now, even through reverence and love themselves count as a two of the 613 mitzvot, commandments, implying that they are not mere wings to another mitzvah, but mitzvahs in their own right. Nevertheless, even though they enumerate as separate mitzvahs, it's appropriate to call them wings, because the point of love is not the love per se, but worship coming from love. Generally speaking, love of God is always aimed at worship. However, there does exist a rare, very high level of love experienced by tzaddikim, known as pleasurable love. This level, the Tanya will now observe, is a pure love not aimed at worship. I think what he's asking, it's very short, he's not really explaining what he's asking. But I think the question is as follows. We know that there are positive commandments and there are negative commandments. In general, when we say right and left, we also refer to the right as the positive. Chesed means to do, to give. When it comes to mitzvah, we said that the right side is love. How to express my love to Hashem? By performing a mitzvah. How to express my awe and fear of Hashem? By not doing a negative commandment. Right? So how if I want to fulfill all the mitzvot, people make the mistake that there is we're only going to focus on the positive commandments. They don't focus so much on the negative commandments. Because the negative commandments, okay, I don't even touch them. Right? I don't touch them. So for example, stealing, right, or eating non-kosher is a negative commandment. What do I have to do to fulfill my obligation of a negative commandment? All I have to do is by not doing it, right? But we don't consciously think about it. I don't wake up in the morning and say, okay, today I'm not going to steal, right? Okay, fulfill the mitzvah, fulfill the negative commandment by not doing it. I'm more focused on the positive mitzvahs. I get up, I put on tefillin, I daven. That is so the expression of love for Hashem is so much in the category of positive mitzvahs. The fear and awe of Hashem is so much more in the not doing the things. But he's going to say, so when we say by the bird has two wings and every mitzvah has two sides, it's not true. The mitzvah, positive mitzvah, is the right side. The negative mitzvah is the left side. So if I put on tefillin, then I'm only having one wing. What's the wing? That me putting on tefillin, I'm expressing a love for Hashem. Where's the other wing that's going to help me fly? If bird cannot fly with one wing, it needs both wings. Where's the fear and the awe in the performance of the mitzvah? And for the other side, where is the love for Hashem in the performance by not doing a negative commandment? That's the question, and the answer is that in each and every mitzvah, even in the positive mitzvah, there is the element of love and there's the element of fear. And also in the negative mitzvah, by me not stealing, I'm also expressing not only my fear of Hashem or awe of Hashem, that I'm doing it out of awe and fear of Hashem, but I'm also doing it out of love for Hashem. And that's what he says over here. Let's read it and elaborate again. And he goes into two types of love and two types of fear. We discussed this earlier in Tanya. It was on page 174, which was chapter the teens, chapter 14. Anybody remember? Okay. So basically, in love,
174.
There's 174, and there's also in chapter 9, page 117. We talked about it basically of a tzaddik. We talked about a tzaddik. There's two types of tzaddiks. There's a complete tzaddik and incomplete tzaddik. And on the flip side, there's a Russia, a complete Russia, an incomplete Russia, and then there's the Beinoni. But in brief, to recap, let me start with the fear, because the fear is a little bit easier, then we'll go into the love. This we call the lower level of fear and the higher level of fear. And really, it's on chapter 41 is going to go into this. I don't want to go too deep into this. Let's make it very in a nutshell. When I fear of a God, when I see fear of God, a lot of people interpret that I'm scared, I'm afraid of Hashem. Why am I afraid of Hashem? I believe Hashem is everywhere. Hashem is our creator. Hashem rules the world. Hashem is the King of Kings. And I don't want to get into trouble with Hashem. If I do something wrong, there'll be consequences. So this is the lowest level of fear. Why? Because you really don't care so much about Hashem, you care more about yourself. You don't want to get hit. It's a selfish fear. The word for fear on the higher level is really where I bring in the word awe. To stand in awe of Hashem, stand in the presence of Hashem. Like you're standing in the presence of a great person, there's a certain behavior. Why? Because it's not appropriate to behave differently. You have the real fear and awe of Hashem is that I behave in a certain way because I feel the presence of Hashem, and in the presence of Hashem, where He's present everywhere 24/7, it's not appropriate to behave something that goes against His will. So it's not about me, it's about my fear and respect and awe standing in the presence of Hashem. Or, as you can explain earlier, and that when I violate a prohibition, what happens? What happens if a person violates a sin, does a sin? We talked about earlier in Tanya. At that moment, he gets disconnected from Hashem. He gets distance from Hashem. And as a person who wants to always be connected to Hashem, I fear that by me doing something that goes against Hashem, I fear the idea of being distant. I don't want to be distant. So these are different levels of fear. So now that's on the flip side for the love as well, right? People sometimes do a mitzvah because they love doing the mitzvah. They enjoy doing a mitzvah, right? Which is very good, which is important. You got to have joy in doing the mitzvah. But why? What's the joy? Many times the joy is self-oriented. It makes me feel good to help somebody else. So by extension, you're saying that if it doesn't make me feel good, I'm not ready to do the mitzvah. Or the question is, will you do the mitzvah? So if that's where your level of observance is, levels of connection, it's good. Start over there. Pick the mitzvah that makes you feel good. But there's a higher calling. And the calling is to do it because I love Hashem regardless. Because I love Hashem, I care and I love Hashem, I will do the mitzvah even if I don't feel good about it, even if I don't understand, or despite, because I don't understand, even that a mitzvah is an expression of my deep love for Hashem. It's like in a relationship, when you do things for your spouse that you don't enjoy doing, that's a real expression of love. I always love Sandy's your smile. It's just great. I love it. So because you embody that person. But the idea is even higher. And he says, and this is what he says over here, tzaddik has what's called ava b'tanugim. It's pleasurable love. Meaning, let's see how he interpret look, let's read in his own words. 489, we write in the middle. But a rare type of love of God, which is an end in itself without leading to worship, is a pleasurable love, which is to take pleasure in God in a way that is a foretaste of the world that is coming. So it's not really worship, but the reward received for worship performed already in this world. As the verse states regarding the mitzvahs, do them today, and is only tomorrow in the afterlife you will receive the reward. We say the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself, right? The reward of what is the reward of the mitzvah? The reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. Meaning the very fact that I have the ability to connect to Hashem, that's the reward. So we don't do mitzvahs because I want to get something out of it. And do I have pleasure by doing a mitzvah in this physical world? Many mitzvahs I do, I don't have real pleasure by doing them. We're talking about pleasure is a very powerful power. The power of pleasure is one of the most powerful powers that we have within us. When I talked earlier in the class about we talk about the tree of life, or how Hashem has created us. So we have intellect, which is high, and we have emotion, right? So it's the intellect that creates the emotion. But then there's something higher than emotion, higher than intellect, and that's the willpower. Remember, we said willpower. The will is very powerful. Even higher than will, or equally as powerful, that's a whole debate in Hasidic teaching, right? What we call, is it ratzon is will, or tainuk is pleasure? Which one is more powerful in the human psyche? Huh? Pleasure. Well, Bella, you said your opinion is pleasure.
It's not mine.
Yeah, your opinion. All right. So which one is more powerful? But the bottom line is they're extremely powerful. They're more powerful than our intellect because they will supersede our intellect. We do a lot of things not because they make logically sense, because I have a will. I want to do something, or I have pleasure in something. The question is the will propelling the pleasure, or the pleasure propelling the will? That's all. Again, these are really debates. But we all agree that pleasure, right? I have a pleasure of eating ice cream 2 a.m, right? It doesn't make any sense to get up out of bed because I want that ice cream, but that pleasure or that willpower pulls me out of bed and I get an ice cream. So the idea, what's the point here? And this is important because it's an important concept. Somebody asked me a few weeks ago, they lost a loved one. What is my loved one doing now in heaven? What are they doing? What are they busy with? Right? Passed away, and now what is she wants to know, what is he doing? It's an important question. How do you answer such a question? But the only answer I can answer what is stated in our mystical books. In the Talmud talks about it. Actually, if you study Daf Yomi, Bella, right? You're gonna read Rosh Hashanah. We're holding 15 about Gehenom, and it's tough over there. But it's important, by the way, to learn it with the Hasidic teaching to attach to it. We can talk about it. But basically, and he mentions right over here, right? He mentions from the Mishnah, from the Talmud. Today we do the mitzvah. Hayom la'asosam. Today we do the mitzvah. U'lemacha lekabel scharim. And tomorrow, only tomorrow referring to the afterlife, I will receive the reward. What type of reward do I get in the afterlife? What type of reward? What is the afterlife? So our neshama, it separates itself from the body, and now the neshama goes to the spiritual realm where it originally is from, right? That we call Gan Eden, and there it reaps the reward. Which reward? The reward of pleasure. It will reap and bask in the pleasures of the mitzvah that it performed in this physical world. So today you do the mitzvah, the reward will be in the light in the world to come. So what's this pleasure is? We know that pleasure is one of the most powerful. As a pleasure, there are many different types of pleasure, but the more refined a pleasure is, the deeper and long-lasting it is, even in this physical world. Correct? Instant pleasure, having a good piece of meat and a good bottle of wine, that's called instant pleasure. It doesn't last long, right? But I'm asking you, what is a deeper pleasure than having a piece of meat? What other pleasures out there? Let me ask you guys, what other pleasures out there besides food? Sandy, you are mute. Huh? You have to unmute. Roy, what did you say?
Intellectual
sex.
pleasures.
Intellectual pleasure? Huh?
What was that? I'm sorry.
You said intellectual pleasure.
Yes.
All right. We agree that intellectual pleasure, that pleasure that you grasp something, is deeper and longer lasting than a very physical pleasure. Although the irony is that a intellectual pleasure is not tangible. It's not physical. It's an idea. It's a concept. Or emotional pleasure, right? Love and a relationship is also a pleasure. And children, for example, nachas, right? There's nothing more powerful than a pleasure of a son or a daughter or a family, something, or somebody, a friend, doing something that gives you pleasure, gives you nachas. It's not tangible, but it's deeper. So the less tangible it is, the deeper it is, the longer lasting it is. And so is also with a mitzvah. And when we perform a mitzvah, it creates tremendous pleasure for our neshama. The problem is that our neshama is stuck in a body, that the body doesn't give us access or blocks the pleasure feeling, and we don't get the sense, that pleasure of performing of a mitzvah. I'm not talking pleasure of feeling good about doing a mitzvah, helping somebody else. I'm talking about the spiritual pleasure that affects, that you have through doing a mitzvah, the connection you have with Hashem. The neshama has it, gets it. Today you do the mitzvah, but it doesn't get to feel it and to bask in it, not until the world come. That is the afterlife. In the afterlife, basically, we are having a great time to go back, and we get all those mitzvahs together that we accumulated in our lifetime, and that gives us the tremendous pleasure. And that's the reason why we do mitzvahs for our loved ones, even they're no longer here, because our mitzvah in their memory gives them, we're giving them a love package, we're sending them, and they're having a great time. So if you're going to do something very physical, right, in memory of my loved one, I'm going to plant a tree, just because you want to have a nice garden. I mean, it's nice, it feels good, but it might be very meaningless for the neshama. What type of pleasure? But if you're going to give tzedakah, or you're going to do a kaddish, or learn a Torah in memory of somebody loved one, these are this tremendous pleasure that he has now in the afterlife. So now, at tzaddik, what is a real tzaddik? A tzaddik gomer. He already feels that pleasure while being in this physical world. That's basically what he said over here. Now we went off a tangent. Let's finish this chapter. A lot. We did a lot today. But for most people, we don't experience pleasurable love and don't experience a taste for the next world in this lifetime. Love of God ought to motivate the worship of God. But any person who has not reached this level to taste something of the world that is coming, instead of actually experiencing the taste of God with pleasurable love, his soul longs and thirsts for God from a distance, languishing for him all day. Instead of the love motivating him to worship God and study Torah, this person doesn't quench his thirst with the word of Torah available to him. Then he's like someone who stands next to a river and cries out, "Water, where is water to drink?" So if you love God and thirst to connect to him, then go and worship him. If your love doesn't lead to worship, then it is as if you are standing next to water saying, "I need to drink." So the Tanya offers a source for this idea. As the prophet bemoans over such a person, "Alas, everyone who is thirsty, go to the water." So if we follow the simple interpretation of this verse, which is everyone that's willing to learn, let him come and learn, it's not clear what the verse is saying. Because obviously a person who is thirsty for study and desires it will come and study of his own accord. And why would the prophet bemoan and say him alas? Rather, the verse appears to be speaking of a person who is thirsty for God, but doesn't realize that this emotional thirsting needs to be quenched practically through Torah and worship, as explained elsewhere at length in the Maimar Adna Hazaki. And that is let's look here in a practical lesson on the sidebar. Love and reverence are like the wings of a bird, which enables your mitzvah to fly to the heavens. Feeling for God needs to be expressed in the worship. Otherwise, it's like standing in front of water and saying, I'm thirsty. Performing mitzvahs with kavanah can help to sweeten harsh judgment in heaven. Just to conclude, that the Rebbe many times understood this idea and concept that people have such thirst for spirituality, especially in the 60s when there was the hippie movements, where people looked at say that these are crazy people. The Rebbe said no. There's a new movement that is thirsty for some spirituality. So it is our job to go out to them on the mitzvah mobiles and to open Chabad houses to channel their thirst in the right places. In the 60s and 70s, there were many Balei Tshuvot, many people who became more and more observant because they were able to take that drive. This is the thirst that we're talking about. So when you are saying, I want to connect to Hashem, right? There's a certain yearning. You need to know where to channel it. And if you just don't pick up the Torah and don't do the mitzvahs, like he's saying, the prophet says, like standing by the river and says, water, I'm thirsty. It's right in front of you. Just pick it up and drink. All great stuff. Lots of, we covered a lot. Now I'm going to ask everyone to review chapter 40. Next week, I'll be in New York for the conference, so it won't be a class on Monday. But I want to ask you to all repeat and review chapter 40. I'm going to give you a test, otherwise you can't come back to class. But we will resume, God willing, in 2 weeks with our great chapter 41.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Enjoy.
Yes, thank you.
Everything.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.